Hi, thank you for joining us today on such short notice. Before I turn it over to Governor Kean and Congressman Hamilton, a couple of points. I'll recognize you. I'll be standing on the side. I'm Al Felsenberg. I think I've talked to all of you on the phone at least once, maybe more. And when you're called upon, would you please give your name and your affiliation for the benefit of the people watching us on television? And we have some mics so we can be heard. And with that, I turn it over to Governor Kean. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. We welcome the decision today of the President and the Vice President to meet in one joint private session and to include all 10 commissioners. We also commend the President for his decision to accept the Commission's request for public testimony under oath by the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, Dr. Condoleezza Rice. We look forward to the Commission's meeting with the President and the Vice President and the public testimony of Dr. Rice, and we are going to be in the process the next few days of trying to schedule those sessions with the White House, and we're going to try to do that promptly. At that, I think Commissioner Hamilton and I are delighted to answer any questions that we can answer.
Gentleman over here, third row. Thank you.
Brad Wright, CNN. How likely is it, do you think, you're going to get testimony from Dr. Rice that's not encumbered or tainted by politics, given the environment that has been created by Mr. Clark and the response from the White House?
Well, my hope is that the kind of inquiries we've held in private, that kind of testimony will be replicated in public. We got some very good testimony from Dr. Rice in private session. It was candid. It was factual. It was to the point of the questions that were asked. She stayed with the Commission as long as we needed her. My hope is that she will replicate that testimony in public as well. The question is where there are differences. And we've got to explore those differences, and if we find actual differences between the witnesses, we probably will, and the Commission is going to have to sort that out in our report.
I think the thing that gave the political edge to the hearings last week was the publication, of course, of the Clark book. We'll not have that in the future. So we expect that Dr. Rice, who gave us very good testimony in the private meeting, will do that in public as well. And I think Tom and I have the job of trying to take the partisan edge off of these hearings. And you do that by focusing on the facts, by pushing for specifics, and then seeing how broad a consensus we can build.
Lady in the second row. Yes.
Michelle Middlestadt, Dallas Morning News. Some of the families have questioned your acceptance of this condition by the White House, that there not be further public testimony by any White House officials, and have said that this might not allow you to go where all the facts lead. Could you address why you accepted this condition?
Yeah, we had no plans in public hearing to invite any member of the White House staff, so this was not a condition we had any problem with. We meet extensively with members of the White House staff and others in private session. We get all the information they have to offer. Our policy in private sessions is that if there are any conflicts, we then place the conflicting witnesses under oath. So we will get all the information necessary to do our report. But this was not something we planned to do anyway. We have extensive witnesses scheduled for the remaining public hearings, but none of them were members of the White House staff.
I want to be very clear that we're not, under the terms of the agreement reached with the White House, we're not precluded from private sessions with White House officials. We are precluded only from public sessions with White House officials.
Gentleman in the blue shirt can't see too well. Thanks.
Eli Lake with the New York Sun. Could you walk us through the negotiations with the White House that eventually led to this deal? When did you start talking to them? What were some of the options that were on the table, and how important was it that you managed to make sure that Ms. Rice this time is going to be under oath?
Well, these were extensive talks. We've had a very good relationship with Judge Gonzales at the White House, and he has been our main contact. And we've been talking to him on a consistent basis, not only about these issues, but a number of other issues where we had either conflicts or potential conflicts or procedural problems or what have you. So this was a continuing conversation. And as far as Dr. Rice particularly, we've been talking about that for,
Months.
yes, a long time. It's not not anything recent.
I understand you've been talking about it for months, but the decision came out today and the letter came out today. What happened in the last, 72 or so hours that changed things, and how many times were you on the phone with the White House, that kind of stuff?
Well, between the two of us, we've been on the phone a lot over the last 3 or 4 days, separately and together. And I think it was, as all things are, a negotiation. But I think that in the end, I suspect that the President and the White House understood that it was very important for the public, as well as for the Commission's work, that Dr. Rice be allowed to testify in public. And we recognized the important constitutional principle that the President was talking about and the White House, and we support that principle of presidential privilege very strongly as commissioners, but we also recognize the fact that this is an extraordinary event in human history, that I'm a presidential appointee, not a congressional appointee, that there are all sorts of reasons why this is different. And our argument all along to the White House is this did not set a precedent, and one of the important conditions under which the White House made this agreement is that we all agree that it sets no precedent.
I think one comment that might be helpful to you is that these issues do not appear in isolation with one another. We've been talking with the White House over a period of months now with regard to a lot of different issues. And they include, of course, access to a number of different kinds of documents, especially the so-called presidential daily briefings. But they've included many other questions of access to documents and to people. The question of whether or not Dr. Rice would testify in public is only one of really many issues that we've talked with the White House about. And I think Tom and I have always felt that it's a package, not a single issue that has to be dealt with.
Mimi.
Hi, Mimi Hall from USA Today. Could you talk a little bit about how long you think she might testify? Would it be as long as she testified in private or not? And what are maybe some of the key questions that you all would like her to answer under oath in a public setting?
We haven't set any kind of time frames as yet. Dr. Rice has always said to us that she'd make herself available to answer any questions we had, and I presume that's probably the same in public as it would be in private. But we want to talk about the transition, the handoff from Mr. Berger to Mrs. Rice. We want to hear from Dr. Rice about the development of policy in the first 8 months of the Bush administration, to the kind of threats and dangers that were apparent to her before 9/11. We want to talk about the day of and the immediate response of the White House. We want to understand what substantive differences there are, perhaps in testimony between Dr. Rice and any other witnesses. We want to understand the nature of the decision-making at the highest levels of government and how that war on terrorism, for instance, is being managed today. I mean, that's the kind of things we want to get out of the testimony.
Vince.
Yeah, Vince Morris with the New York Post. Can you say why you would agree to have the Vice President and the President testify at the same time? It seems to someone else that it might be to allow, Mr. Cheney to help Mr. Bush with the answers. And I'm just confused why you would allow them to go together. It seems like it compromises your investigation to have them answer questions at the same time.
Well, we recognize that Mr. Bush may help Mr. Cheney with some of the answers, but it was the suggestion of the White House, and it seemed to us, in exchange for getting all 10 commissioners to be able to ask any questions they wanted to a member of the staff in as well, that we'd get the answers to the questions we needed to write the report. That's the basic bottom line for us is always the report. Is what we're doing going to get us the answers to the questions we need to write the best possible report? And I think we came to the conclusion that this will.
We did. The trade-off, of course, was we were going to meet with the President, only the two of us, the Chairman and the Vice Chairman. And the other commissioners very much wanted to be a part of the conversations with the President and the Vice President. We recognize that all commissioners are equal in this endeavor, and so it was very important to us that all 10 commissioners be present. As the governor has mentioned, we believe that we will be able to fulfill our mandate, which is to give a complete and full accounting of events under this format, in talking to both the President and the Vice President. So we think in every way that it's satisfactory.
Can I just follow so I'm clear? So you're saying you did not want it to be structured this way and agreed to it only because that's the only condition the White House will allow if you had all 10 commissioners in the room?
Well, the important point for us was to try to have all 10 commissioners in the room. I don't know that I agree quite with your quid pro quo analysis of it, but for us, the 10 commissioners were the key point, and the fact that we think we can get the information we need with the Vice President and the President in the room.
Yeah, this was never a source of contention, that particular provision.
Gentleman in the trench coat.
Mark Matthews with the Baltimore Sun. Two questions. Are there any outstanding problems that you still have with the White House, or does the agreement today clear it up? And secondly, do you think the Commission now needs to, in light of what Mr. Clark testified to, delve more deeply into whether Iraq was a distraction from the overall war on terrorism?
On the first question, I don't think we see any major remaining issues between ourselves in the White House. We think this agreement wraps up certainly the major issues. Clearly, there are questions of scheduling and the timing of the appearances that we have to work out with the White House. On the second point, Richard Clark really made 2 points, principal points. One was that we're fighting the wrong war. That's the point you raised. That is not in the mandate of the Commission. That's a very important foreign policy question, but it's really not in our responsibility. The second point that he made, which was that the Bush administration did not give priority or urgent priority to counterterrorism, that very much is in the mandate of the Commission and will be one of our principal findings.
James.
James Meek with the New York Daily News. Just to be clear, when the President and Vice President meet with the full Commission, they will or will not be under oath when they answer your questions?
I believe
They will not
be under oath, no.
Just to follow up, is that, you've said that anybody who appears before the Commission, at least in public, would appear under oath. Is that inconsistent? Do you see a problem with that? Would you prefer them under oath?
No, it's not inconsistent, because what we've said to all our witnesses who have been, there are now over 1,000 of them who have given testimony in private, that the only time we've ever requested oaths was when there's been a real difference and real inconsistencies with one witness says and another witness says. That's one area. And the other areas, I don't think, I'm a historian, but not in this area, but I don't think presidents, one, it's very unusual for presidents to appear before a commission. Lyndon Johnson, for instance, refused to appear before the Warren Commission. He sent a written statement. He said presidents don't do that. So the fact that he's appearing and answering questions, we're very, very grateful of that, and obviously we'll be able to ask him some questions. Without the answers, we wouldn't be able to do the job in the report we want to do.
Gentleman in the brown jacket. Sorry. Thank you.
Ken Fireman from Newsday. 2 questions about this agreement. Number one, when did it actually fall in place? Was it today, yesterday, whenever? And secondly, did at any time you have to suggest that you might be prepared to subpoena Dr. Rice?
It fell into place last night. There were pieces of it that fell into place earlier, but the full agreement fell into place last night, and we have never threatened a subpoena.
Larry, you had then we'll go in the back.
Larry Arnold from Bloomberg News. I want to return to the purpose of having Dr. Rice return before the commission. Governor Kean, you used the word factual to describe her testimony in private. Is the accuracy of what she told you in private one of the issues that the commission is going to return to, given what it has since learned?
Well, there were, as you know, some statements made by Mr. Clark that she has now disagreed to in interviews, perhaps with some of you. She said that didn't happen that way. Some others have said the same thing. We've got to try and clear up those discrepancies as best we can. Some of those questions may be important to the fact-finding of our report, and obviously we will, in our hearing, go to some of those questions.
Michael?
Mike Isikoff with Newsweek. Does the commission have it within its discretion to release transcripts of private testimony at some point, or at any point?
It depends. If the testimony is from somebody who was deeply involved in secrets that this government possesses, then no. We don't have that authorization by ourselves. That would have to go through the White House process and before it was released. If it's testimony from somebody who is not dealing with matters of national security, then I presume we would have the option, if we wanted to, of releasing that testimony.
But clearly you've gotten vast amounts of private testimony that cover some of the material that's being released in public, and there's going to be, obviously, with the President and Vice President appearing, a great deal of interest in what exactly they had to say. Have you given thought to how you're going to handle requests for the public release of private testimony?
I think we've not given extensive thought to that. I don't think at this point we rule anything in or rule anything out. We will draft our report on the basis of our investigation of the facts, and as I think you probably know, we have to submit the report to the White House prior to its publication for any national security matters. In other words, the White House will look it over to see if things should be stricken or reworded in order to comply with the national security requirements. The problem with releasing transcripts from the private testimony would be that there would be very large areas, I think, that could not be made public. We're going to try the best we can here to make this report as public as possible and to avoid, to the extent that we can, redactions.
Gentleman up here. Thank you.
Cam Simpson from the Chicago Tribune. You said that there are still questions over the timing and the where and how of the testimony of Dr. Rice. I assume you said of some people. I'm assuming that includes her. I know there are some concerns from some commissioners that they don't want her testimony to detract from some of the other important issues you're looking at hearings that have already been scheduled. But I'm sure by the same token, the White House doesn't want to have just a day of focus on Condoleezza Rice. So can you talk about what's going on, how you're working to schedule those things and work out what's coming up? And also, was there a vote today by the commission? What were the mechanics of that?
Well, first of all, if you remember what we said earlier, that this agreement was finally worked out last night. This morning we were in commission meetings from 8:30 on and broke the commission meeting to come over here. So we have not had time to talk to the White House about scheduling or anything else since that agreement was reached last night. So that we'll simply be discussing, and when we have dates worked out, we'll let you know right away. The commission takes very few votes. Where possible, we try to operate from consensus, and there was unanimous consensus this morning to accept the agreement that was worked out by the Vice Chairman and I with the White House.
There are a lot of considerations that have to come into this scheduling. What's the order of the witnesses, as you suggest, may be an important part of it, but other more mundane matters are involved, just the schedules of people. And coordinating all of those schedules is no easy task. So that'll have to be done in the days ahead.
Phil.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Phil Sheenan from the New York Times. We have a fairly dramatic reversal of course by the White House on two key issues, Dr. Rice's testimony and the meetings with the President and Vice President. Were you surprised by the White House offer, and do you think it was a response to the flap over the Clark book, or political pressure, or what?
Well, I couldn't guess at the motivations of the White House. So all I can tell you is that this did not come suddenly. That these had been, as we said, a process of negotiations on this point and others now for going back some time. We were very happy that we were able to reach the agreement. We were very grateful to the White House for understanding that this was necessary for us to meet our mandate. But I understand your question, but you make me get inside the White House and I'm not there.
Doug, you didn't have one yet.
Doug Pasternak, NBC News. You spoke about one of the reasons with Condi Rice's testimony, you want to clear up some of the discrepancies between what Clark's recollection of events has been and what she's been saying publicly. Can you be any more specific on what key items you want to focus on with Condi Rice about what she needs to clear up?
Personally, I'd have to go back over the testimony. I know, and many of you have written about some of the potential conflicts, and it's not necessarily, as I say, what Condi Rice said to us in the 4 or 5 hours we had with her. It's sometimes some of the things she said to all you or in interviews since. But there are some differences, and that's our job as a commission. These aren't the only differences we found in recollections of people of various events over the last 5 or 6 years. And each of those times we get differences. We've got to try and talk to as many people as possible. If we can, reconcile those differences. If not, we've got to make some judgments in our final report.
The staff is now reviewing testimony from both Mr. Clark and the testimony we had from Dr. Rice, and the differences will be highlighted for us. I can think of 2 or 3 offhand, but I don't think I should identify them because I don't want to give prominence to 1 or 2 above others.
Dan over there, and then Sean. Thank you.
Hi, Dan Egan, Washington Post. To go back to this issue regarding the sudden change, and you're saying that it was something that's been in the works for quite some time. Condi Rice was on TV 2 days ago saying absolutely will not, cannot appear in public before the commission. Was the Rice issue on a separate track from the Vice President issue? I mean, when you're referring to something being in the works for a long time, are you actually referring to the President and Vice President issues as opposed to the Rice issue, which seems to have taken a dramatic turn?
What I was talking about really was the negotiations have been going on for a long time. And remember that to the best of my knowledge and my reflections is that Dr. Rice did want to appear in public herself. She was told, because of the constitutional principles involved, that she wasn't able to. And that, I gather, was a matter of some distress to her personally. So what we were talking about was not with her. We were talking with the lawyers involved in the issue, and that's what I was saying. These things have been going on, these discussions have been going on for some time. But the resolution came last night. Now, sometimes you have to work on things for a while, and all of a sudden there's a moment and click, things come together, and this may have been that moment last night. But that's what I meant by discussions have been going on for some time.
All right, Sean. I want to get everybody in once, and then we'll go around and
Yeah, a couple of questions. First of all, I read somewhere that there was, in fact, no transcript of Dr. Rice's private meeting with you. Is that correct?
I believe there are extensive notes, but no actual word-for-word transcript.
Okay. Also, will you be getting in, or is it your intention with her to try and get into this question of the warnings that the administration and specifically the President received?
Yes, we wanted to find out the warnings that occurred before 9/11. We are going to get into that. Yeah.
I think one of the big questions we have to address is the flow of information with regard to terrorism going to President Clinton and President Bush, so that we get a sense or a feel of how the presidents assess the information coming to them, and we want to get a sense of what the information was that went to them as far as we can recreate it.
And finally, Governor Kean, you were quoted in the New York Times this morning as using the phrase "under penalty of perjury," which suggests that one of the things that you want to do by this public sworn testimony is to ensure that Dr. Rice is being honest with you. I mean, it seems to me that, there's two elements to this. One, it'll be in public, but it'll also be under oath. Could you talk about the importance of the second of those two elements a little bit?
I think it's important to understand that when you put a witness under oath, that doesn't mean you think the witness is going to lie to you. We have put all of our public witnesses under oath this year, or at least most of them, and I think all of the senior officials have been put under oath. I think when you do that, you indicate to the American people the seriousness of what you're doing, and lend weight, I believe, to the testimony. But it certainly does not mean that the Commission is thinking that the witness, whomever he or she may be, is not going to tell the truth.
Gentleman on the end.
Jim Puzangaro with the San Jose Mercury News. I just wanted to clear up one thing. Were you seeking additional time with Dr. Rice, either in private or in public, however, prior to Dick Clark's statements, or was that the main impetus for wanting to question her again?
No, we wanted to question her in public with or without Dick Clark's appearance. We wanted to go through for 2 days, we wanted to have the full range of top officials who served now the Clinton or Bush administration to talk about what happened leading up to 9/11. She, because of issues of Constitution, I guess, was the one official we weren't able to get in either administration. So naturally that would have left a hole, and that's why we wanted to see her. We got her testimony in private for the same reason. Before we knew anything about the public testimony that we got later from another witness, although we had him for 15 hours in private, so we had a lot of his thoughts also.
Thanks. Bob Cohen, Newark Star-Ledger. Every time there's been an agreement with the White House, we find out later there's been some restrictions or some caveats. Is there anything here? Is there going to be a transcript of President Bush and Vice President Cheney's comments? Will there be any time restrictions? Are there any caveats that we're going to come dribbling out in the days ahead here?
We haven't talked a definite time. It's certainly going to be more than the hour that was originally offered some time ago. On the other hand, it's the President of the United States, so he's not going to take up all day with us either. But we hope to be able to ask all the questions that are important to us. We're going to prioritize them because it is the President and the Vice President. We're going to talk to the staff and the commissioners about the most important questions that we need to inform our report. We're going to start off with those, so we're sure of getting the most important question answered, and then we'll get every question, hopefully, that every commissioner has answered to the best of our ability in the time that we're given.
The President's letter, or rather the Council's letter, Mr. Gonzalez's letter to us, to Tom Kean and myself, and our response to that letter is the whole agreement. There are no side agreements at all. That's the whole agreement.
Will there be a transcript, or will it just be notes?
Well, I'm sorry?
Will there be a transcript of their...
Of the President's?
The President, or will it just be...
Well, part of the agreement is that we, the Commission, In addition to the 10 commissioners, we'll have one staff note taker there. What the White House will have, I don't know.
All right, why don't we take the remaining three for Vince?
Vince Morris for the New York Post. Vince Morris for the New York Post. Can you say, each of you, how you think the commission's credibility would be affected if one of your fellow commissioners, Bob Kerrey, decides to accept a running mate position with Senator John Kerry?
Well, any of the commissioners except the chairman and the vice chairman, I suppose, have a possibility of doing that, but it'll be long after our report is out. So.
We have enough real problems and not
Yes.
to think of speculative problems.
Well, but just in all seriousness, there is the time frame for Senator Kerry to pick a running mate is this spring, and one of your fellow commissioners' name comes up again and again. He has not ruled it out. You know, for people who want to see the commission be nonpartisan, you know, what would be the impact of losing a member, just to either side?
Well, the impact clearly is you have to bring the commissioner, the new commissioner, up to speed. And as you'll remember, Senator Kerry replaced Senator Cleland, and took him a few weeks to get up to speed, but I think most people would say he got up there pretty quickly. And that would occur in the future. But look, we can think of dozens of things that might happen between now and the time the report comes out, and we can't speculate on all of them. We've got a whole host of real problems in front of us, and I think we'd better tackle those.
And Congressman Hamilton's my candidate anyway for that.
James Meek with the New York Daily News. A number of members of the panel have said that regardless of whether Dr. Rice were to testify in public, they wanted to continue having a classified level discussion with her in private, particularly to discuss something that you all didn't have when you met her with her the first time, for example, the August 6th PDB, 2001. So is it possible still that in spite of this public testimony, you would meet with her again privately for a number of hours?
Yes, so first of all, we did have that PDB when we talked to her, and the whole commission had had it before we had a session with her. But yes, she has graciously said, and did after that session, that she'd be willing to meet with us in private again to answer any questions we had. So there are some questions that some commissioners have and some staff members have that are in the area of classified questions, and we would ask those in another private briefing.
So you will have.
Yes.
Michelle?
Have you scheduled, Michelle Middlestadt, Dallas Morning News, have you scheduled your sessions, your private sessions with Mr. Clinton and Mr. Gore, and could you go over what the ground rules will be there in terms of number of commissioners present, whether you'll have a transcript, any possible release of information from that?
We have scheduled. We have not released any dates because we haven't released any dates with anybody we're meeting with, frankly, in private. But the ground rules are basically that we'll have the time we need to answer whatever questions necessary, and that all 10 commissioners will be there, depending on their availability.
And in terms of any public release of any aspect of what they discuss with you?
We hadn't talked about that. Normally we don't. Normally we have not released materials from private sessions.
Will there be a transcript for those sessions?
And we haven't even talked about, we do a transcript of those sessions. I don't know if we talked to the former president about that or not.
Not settled.
Not settled yet.
Up here? And we'll take the remaining hands and then we'll...
Brad Wright from CNN. Why not have President Clinton and Vice President Gore in public testimony? I mean, it seems as though they knew as much as the current White House does about what was going on with Al-Qaeda and so forth. Why not have them public? Wouldn't that be a valuable thing to have in public?
Initially, at least, we've not requested, I think, but we've respected the privacy of the two former officials, and that'll be our first step.
Phil Sheenan from the New York Times. Is it fair to assume you did push for a transcript of the interview with the President and Vice President and the White House resisted? And if so, doesn't that hinder you a bit to not have a transcript available of your conversations with the two men?
No, we didn't push, or have not at this point. No, because in a number of staff determines basically what they need in some of these interviews. And very often, if the transcript is one thing, sometimes extensive notes, as we did with the first meeting with Condoleezza Rice, and we did those extensive notes at our choice, not we weren't required not to have a transcript. So I think we're happy with taking extensive notes.
I'm sorry, but given the historical nature of that meeting, wouldn't it be a valuable thing to have a transcript of exactly what the President and Vice President said?
We may have one. I don't know that because, as you know, the White House in most meetings usually does take a transcript. So we may well have a transcript, but it may well be from their initiative.
You're speaking here about the terms of the agreement. The agreement specifically provides that the commission will have one note taker present. Doesn't say anything about what the White House will have present. And we find that an acceptable manner of proceeding because we think very, very careful notes will be taken and that we will be able to glean from those what we need to fulfill our mandate.
Okay, Michael, Dan, and then the remaining two will have...
You made an allusion before to something that a lot of people have speculated about, that the White House is going to first have to clear the report before it's publicly released. That being the case, you have this July 26th deadline. Is that your deadline to submit it to the White House, or is that the deadline for public release? And if so, when do you expect to release it, provide it to the White House for a pre-clearance review?
Well, the deadline agreed upon, as you know, was July 26th for finishing the report. We are going to do our best to finish it earlier than that. And if we get it finished early, the earlier we finish it, the earlier we can submit it to the White House. We've talked even of submitting pieces of it, perhaps for clearance early on, chapters or whatever, if we can do that to the White House. I think everybody has an interest in getting this report out as fast as possible. And the White House, under Andy Card's leadership, has appointed a special team actually to see that that's done. So we hope we will submit it as fast as we can get it completed, and we believe that they will expedite the process for clearing it so we can get it out to the public.
This is a major concern of ours, and we're doing everything we can to plan for it, as Tom has indicated, as the governor has indicated. We think we can handle it. We have in mind the experience of the joint inquiry, where they took several months to get information declassified. So we're going to try to learn from that experience, but we are aiming for public release on July 26th.
Dan, then the man in the back, and we'll cut it off with Sean.
Dan Egan, Washington Post. To go back to this transcript issue again, when have you done transcripts in these private interviews, and when haven't you? What's been the rule that's guided that decision?
Well, I've been in on a good many, not 1,000, but a good many of the interviews. Seems like 1,000 sometimes. I've been in on a good many. We have not taken transcripts in those sessions. And the sessions in which I have been participating, for the most part, have been very senior officials of the government. To my knowledge, we've had no transcripts. Or have we?
We have recorded a number of those interviews, and can and could prepare transcripts and check those recordings for accuracy in many cases.
Okay, so we have the recordings, we have no transcripts
But
at this
how
point.
many recordings? I mean, I guess I'm confused about what are the guidelines here? When are you recording? When are you not recording? I mean, however good the note takers are, I think everyone in this room who takes notes would agree that a tape recorder is even better. So what?
I think I'd agree to that too.
And what's the thinking behind? I mean, why wouldn't the White House simply allow a tape recording to protect everyone?
Well, I think that's a question you address to the White House.
Well, okay, back to all your other witnesses. Why, again, what have been the ground rules for recording or not recording witnesses in private?
Phil, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, Dr. Zellick for those watching.
The question of recording or not recording interviews has been a subject of negotiation with the witnesses and discussion in the staff. There are actually competing views about this within the staff and among commissioners. Some reporters find, for example, that people will talk to you in certain cases in a more forthcoming way if you don't record them. Some people don't care whether you record them or not. There are some officials who are so senior that it's always our preference to record. In general, the Commission's approach is we generally prefer to record interviews, especially with high-level officials, unless there are countervailing circumstances or very strong preferences where either the staff or the other side choose not to have a recording. So we have a number of interviews recorded, but in a number of cases they are not, and there's no easy categorical bright line to separate one column from the other. But there are numerous notes taken in these interviews, and we have a complicated process for then writing up those notes to be sure that everyone involved agrees that they are reliable.
We go into these interviews knowing what we want, and therefore we, I think, are quite accurate in taking notes at the critical points.
The gentleman in the back had a question? Yes, and then we'll end it with Sean.
Hi, Sean Smith from The Hill. How successful has the Commission been at staying above the political fray, and has there been any pressure from outside the Commission to act with partisan interests in mind?
I think we've been quite successful in staying above the political fray, and that's largely due to the leadership of Chairman Kean, Governor Kean. We've not had a single partisan vote in, over a year. On some, we've had only a few votes, really, a handful of votes, but none of them have been partisan. Clearly, the hearings last week had a partisan edge to them. I think that's the first time, really, that the hearings really had a sharp partisan edge, and then only with respect to one witness, Mr. Clark. If you look at the staff statements, which I think were deservedly widely praised, they were, under the directions that Tom and I gave, stripped of partisanship, and they focused on facts. We are 5 Republicans, we are 5 Democrats on the Commission, but I think all of us have put aside those partisan feelings, recognized the seriousness of the task assigned to us, and the importance of the recommendations we will make. And I have just been impressed over and over again with the manner in which the commissioners have proceeded. And I frankly don't find very much partisanship, although some of it broke out in the hearings the other week. But the principal reason has been the extraordinary leadership of Governor Kean.
Well, just to throw that back, Congressman Hamilton is the example in this town of a bipartisanship that, boy, do we ever need in this country. I'm sorry it's not more prevalent, but Congressman Hamilton is an example of that, and his leadership in this commission has resulted, I think, in the kind of bipartisanship that we've been able to achieve at this point. We're not, I know you all refer to as Republican commissioners said that, and Democratic commissioners said that. That's not the way we hold our meetings. It really isn't.
Last question,
Sean. Yeah, just if I could cheat slightly, to clear up Mike's question, you will be publishing the report. I mean, it will be available to the public on July 26th.
We're going to do our very best to do it. Now it's dependent on this review. And we can say we'll have it finished and ready for the public, but how long that review is going to take, we can't predict. What we can say is that it's to everybody's interest to get it out sooner rather than later. So we do believe that this process the White House has set up under Andy Card is going to help expedite that. But we cannot, I would love to say, if it was just us, I'd say that's the date, but we cannot predict this process.
And then my question would be whether you could comment on the condition that the White House has placed on the Rice interview that you do not subsequently ask for any other... Oh, that was already asked? I'm sorry, I'll have to check the transcript if there is one.
Well, I guess that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
You did?
I'm on that, and I feel like
I'll make a spot.
But the thing is, Galveston area. I saw, and there was a